from what perspective we are looking, from the human perspective, from the spiritual perspective, from the physical perspective, from the psychological perspective. So there is many. And one of the major things could be trauma.
Then it's a little bit easier to start letting some of that stuff come out and discuss it and talk about it. And it may be good just to talk about the fact that it's difficult to talk about.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to the Share.care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own interest to help others. And today, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Jion Blonstein. Jion studied Gestalt therapy and power psychology in Germany. He developed his own method, a combination between Gestalt therapy, transpersonal psychology, trauma therapy, and Zen, which he uses and continuously evolves to help work with trauma and its imprints. Plus, Jion teaches the art of devotion to your respective experience and life situation. You get to know yourself as something that is bigger than the little self. Welcome, Jion.
Thank you very much for having me, Simon.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I love doing research into your background. It's so fascinating, and as you mentioned, we were talking in the pre-show that your first name is a name that was given to you as a combination of two different words. Do you want to take us back and explore that? You may remember, and the audience certainly knows, there was a Wayback Machine, a time machine invented by a guy called Doc Brown in the movie Back to the Future. And if you hit 88 miles an hour, you could travel in time. Do you want to take us back in time to, some events that shaped you, that helped you become the person that you are today?
Yes, that sounds very interesting. So I will make it short because this is a huge story. And obviously there are many, many different steps which would completely not fit into this framework right now. But to make it short, I just felt in my heart when I was very young already that something is missing in my life. And I couldn't really pinpoint what it is, because in my parents and where I was growing up, the school system, everything around me, my surrounding wasn't really anything about spirituality or psychology or self-development in any way. So when I felt something, there is something in life that I wasn't getting, like a nutrition that you were lacking kind of feeling. And I was looking and seeking. And at some point I came to philosophy, and philosophy was giving me a little bit of that, a little bit of feeling of understanding, but it wasn't enough. And then I went into psychology, and the same feeling, it wasn't enough. Something was missing. And then I finally touched Taoism and Zen. And in that moment, when I just read one sentence in a book, it completely vibrated in my whole body and my whole being. I felt this is what I was looking for, and this is what I know, but I couldn't really understand it. I thought actually I'm crazy. I felt like I'm not in my body, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind. But
wow.
And I was dreaming a lot about death, but I wasn't suicidal. So I didn't understand, why am I dreaming about death? Why is death so intriguing to me? And what is the universe? How can it be completely infinite? What is infinity? Things like that were deeply intriguing me and touching my whole body and soul so much that I felt like I'm going crazy. So I really deeply wanted to touch these questions, but nobody could answer me that. There was only this kind of mental, cerebral answers, but nothing deeper. And so I actually came from a Jewish family from the Soviet Union. My father is American, and we moved to Germany. So I grew up in Germany. So I went through many different countries in my life, different languages, and that also made my view more broader and want me to connect with the whole world, I think. And so these deep questions and questioning led me to spirituality, to psychology, to philosophy. And only there I found belonging, and I found a sense of, okay, this is something which gives me purpose. And so I went at some point then to the Zen monastery, and in Japan I went before to other monasteries, of course, met different teachers, but I felt like, no, this is not the real thing. I want something deeper. I want a teacher who really touches me in my whole body and soul. And so I went to Japan, and I met there a couple of teachers like this, and I studied with them, I lived with them. And that's basically the whole foundation that I built. So psychology, philosophy, and then Zen. And from there, I came back to society at some point. I realized that I have everything that I wanted. I have. So now it's time to challenge me again. Now it's time to go back to where I was suffering, where I wasn't feeling happy and wanting to escape from. And so I went back to society, and it was hell. It was so difficult. So again, I looked for a teacher who could show me the path where I can live in society and at the same time do the practice. So being and manifesting that essence of the practice, awakening, enlightenment within society, and not some further away in some monastery or a mountain or nature, but in the midst of all this busyness and all this stress of society. I was seeking again, and I couldn't find it. So what did I do? I realized, okay, if you cannot find it, then you have to bring it to where you are. So bring the mountain to Muhammad, right? And that's what I did. I was suffering a lot. I was looking and looking, and I couldn't find it. So then I decided, okay, it's time for me to be a teacher and to combine this together and to find a way. How can I combine awakening, that experience of awakening, enlightenment, Zen, with the normal life? And so I discovered the psychology in combination with Zen practice and Zen philosophy and Zen psychology, and I combined it and I practiced it with my students, with my clients, and that is what I'm still doing now, practicing over 20 years now, and connecting, combining, and working with people. My whole work is improvisation, so it's only for a few specific people. It's not meant for a majority of people who need structure, who need to know what is the next step, who need all this kind of stepping stones first. So my students are already a little bit beyond that, and they can already drive the bike without the help of the, how do you call it in English? This
training wheels.
Wheels. Yes, exactly. So this is my client. This is my students. And anyway, I don't want to work with millions of people. I believe that the work with an individual is far more effective than working with a whole bunch of people or huge groups of people. And then later I also became a singer. So I'm a dancer and combined all that in my work.
The girls must love you.
Yes, embodiment, because it's not just enough when you hear like, okay, what do you do with this anger emotion? I feel angry. What do you do with that? So a normal psychologist will say, okay, if you have anger and feel it, express it, say it, write it down, right? The Buddhist monk will say, okay, meditate, be mindful of the energy, right? So in my work, I say, do all of that, but also show me your anger, express it, sing it, dance it, move it, right? Shout it, all of this. The embodiment is so important, and that makes us human, and that gives us the ability also then to live in society as a human being and not just escape from it. So this is my field of work. I call it Zen therapy, and I think I'm one of the founders of it. I mean, there are other people who are practicing it to some degree, but I really go into the extreme. I really balance it because I also have the experience of both fields of psychology and of Zen in the real setting. I was really living in a monastery, really having a Zen-Master, really being a monk, not just studying it or meditating a couple of times. So this is very rare. And yeah, here we are. And I'm writing a book, Zen Therapy Koans.
Wow.
I'm writing it already 10 years, still didn't finish. But now, thanks to ChatGPT, I'm way faster. Because with the translation, it helps a lot from German to English and so forth. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's me.
Well, I mean, I love that combination that you're talking about. You're taking some really ancient methodologies and then you're combining it with ChatGPT as a way of doing it. Fantastic. It's just this integration of everything. I've got to ask the question, and you may not remember, but when you mentioned when you first you read the Taoism and Zen book, there was a sentence that stood out. Do you remember what that sentence was, just out of curiosity?
Yes, I remember. That sentence was that the tragedy of life, of the human life, is not that we die, but that we are alive without ever having been born.
That's really powerful. It is. And from what you're talking about there, I mean, you see so many people that go through life that are not really living life. Is that part of what your aim is to help awaken that so people can live to their fullest potential?
You could say that in a very simplified way.
Yeah.
But
I'm a simple guy.
prefer the complexity of it.
I'll let you put it in your words.
No, simplicity. This is, in a way, this is good. This is what we need to be simple in order to reach a lot of people, in order to that, and that's what I want more and more. I used to hide myself. I used to feel like I don't want to share. For what? And partially that was because I had to heal more, to want to open more, and so that was my own problem and challenge. But now I see that it is important to be as simple as we can. So what you're saying is very good. How I would say it is that if you seek awakening in your life, what is seeking awakening? What is it seeking awakening? Why would you seek something that you don't know? Why would you want something that you never had before? So it's impossible. The only reason why you seek awakening is because awakening is seeking itself within you. And so then if I say I help people to awaken, I would lie. I'm not helping people to awaken. I'm just helping people to give the birth to that which is already there. So you could see I'm like a doula, right? I'm not helping someone to get pregnant. I'm just helping someone with the birth, right?
But I mean, that's what I understand to be the case. Everybody has within them everything that they need to enjoy life, to experience whatever it is that they want to experience. That's already inside them. Is that where you're coming from with that? That whatever it is that you need for your life is already inside you. You just need to be aware of that and allow it to come out.
In a way, if it is inside you, yes. But here comes that spiritual concept. The spiritual concept is that everyone is already awakened. And so therefore, maybe you don't even need to practice anything. It's already there. Well, here comes the complexity, and I call it complexity. I don't call it complicated. I call it complex. So we have to see as simplicity and complexity together. And so the simplicity is that we are all awakened. The complexity is that within that human condition that we are living in, not everyone's mission in this life is to awaken. And it doesn't need to be, because we are already awakened. So if I awaken, I realize that everyone is awakened. I see everyone's awakening, no matter who I meet, no matter what you believe in. If you, even for me, I'm born into a Jewish family, but if Hitler would come to me and seek awakening, I would help him. I would help him to awaken, to enlighten, because awakening is the realization that we can, which helps us to see beyond all the physical and mental constructs that we believe to be. So I can see through all the things, all the layers of individuality and identity that you have or someone has. I see through that, right to that source, which I and you, we are sharing together.
Is that...
So that is awakening, but not everyone's mission in this life is awakening. And if you understand that, you will not judge other people if you feel they are not awakened. You will not judge them anymore. You will see that they have a different mission, and that's it.
That's an interesting point that you mentioned there about not judging. And does that connect to being able to listen? And I'm not talking listening from the perspective of using your ears. I'm talking listening to what is for that particular person. So is it a case when we're interacting with people, and you mentioned about not judging whether they're awakened or not, but I mean, it goes across to a broad range of things. If we're accepting of the person is where they need to be at, is that where you're getting to with that we interact and listen, go, okay, that person's at where they're at. It's not for me to judge and say that should be different, but just notice where they're at, and then I can interact with them in a more effective way.
In a way, yes. But simply said, yes. In the therapy field, if I'm in my therapist, let's say, field of work, in that moment, I also have to judge. But I don't judge the judgment. And what it means is I don't attach myself to the judgment. So it's just a stream of things going and coming and going. I don't need to attach it. In that moment when I don't identify with the judgment, hold on to it, it's there. I can work with it if I need to, but I'm not identified. I'm not holding on to it, and I can let it go anytime and find new things at the same time. If you don't judge, like many say, don't judge. Don't judge can be helpful as a practice for a beginner, as a practice, but not as a way of living. You see, that practice is good for monks. If you live in a monastery and you want to awaken very quick, just stop judging. Try it. I mean, if it works, it will be easier in the monastery. If you are living in society and you don't judge, you will see, okay, it's green, so I can go over the street, because what does it mean? Oh, this car is actually not so small, not very small. It's not so big. Judgment is necessary for humans. We need to see also if someone is toxic. If someone comes to you and wants to hurt you, there are some people who are malicious in this world. If they want to hurt you and you say, I don't judge him, and it's okay for him to hurt others, it's okay for him to hurt me, that's more of a sign that you are traumatized and you never recovered from boundary breakings in your family system. And so then you allow that in this spiritual concept to happen to you again or to others. That's not good. That has to be healed. So we need to set also boundaries, and we need to be able also to judge, but judge without judgment. That is the key. But that is a higher, of course, an art to learn. And so as a beginning, it's maybe okay not to judge if you can do that.
It's an interesting point, and I love that you went and talked about boundaries there, because it's from what I see, it becomes fairly it's quite common where people don't set boundaries, or they allow themselves to be, walked over, or they go the other extreme. They will be really, if someone breaks a boundary, they'll be quite aggressive in a response. How important is finding what your boundaries are, and what are ways that you can then set those boundaries in a way that's going to be proactive and in a creative, well, not creative, in a way that allows people to evolve a relationship in a positive way?
This is a very deep question because boundary therapy work starts with boundaries.
Mm,
The Zen is all about breaking boundaries, but
yeah.
therapy is all about the beginning of therapy is all about setting boundaries, if you ask me.
Mm,
So this is also how can we connect that? That is also why many people didn't manage to connect those two worlds together
mm,
because they don't understand what actually boundary means.
yeah.
So let me ask you, what do you think is the most essential boundary before any other boundary? What do you think is the most essential boundary? If you have a child, what
Hmm.
would be the most essential boundary?
The road. No. I'm thinking I mean, it's for me, when I look at you, say, what is the most essential boundary? It's the boundary of who I am, as in my personal uh, identity of who I think I am.
Yes, yes. That goes in that direction.
Mm,
So in my work, the most essential boundary that we can have is unconditional love.
right. So how?
Because you see, if you do harm to me, if you
Mm-hmm.
say something harmful to me, all I have to do is look into my eyes and tell me again.
Mm,
And it will be hard for you to say that because when we connect, unconditional love is always present there somewhere.
mm,
And so in that, when you really give unconditional love to your child, if your
mm.
child, and what is unconditional love? That's just a concept, just
That's
words.
going to be my next
Unconditional
question.
love, yeah, that is a mixture of awareness
Mm,
and compassion. And
mm,
it's not something that we do, it's the essence of awareness itself. It's the essence of awareness, of consciousness itself, is
mm,
unconditional love. So if I can be fully present with you, if
mm,
you are my child and I'm fully present with you, and at the same time compassionate, if I am able to do that, you will not want to break boundaries with me. You will not want to hurt me in any way. You will want to work with me in a team, as a team. But
mm,
if I don't give you the presence, if I don't give you the love, the compassion with the presence together, you will want to break all the rules, you will want to break all the boundaries, and you will want to do everything and nothing, and maybe ADHD and all these kind of things will come. So this is what is lacking the most in children and in us is unconditional love. If you have it, nobody, that is also the essence of Aikido, is a martial arts from Japan,
mm,
is that you don't become so powerful, so strong, so skillful that you can self-defend yourself, but you become so wise, so skillful, so wise that nobody wants to attack you in the first place.
mm. I noticed that very much because my son's recently got his black belt in karate, and um, I noticed from that perspective, his sensei talks a lot of that component where when you walk, there's a certain energy that projects when you have that experience that, as you say, people just don't want to do that, to attack you, because that energy is projected out. Is that part of what you're talking about from that side of things when you're talking about that unconditional love? Because one of the things I think is misconstrued by a lot of people is when they look at martial arts, they think it's a violent sport, but really it's about self-control, about about discipline, about so many factors in that category. Is that part of what we're talking about there as well, where that all those things combine to give you that energy that's projected out, and it projects a confidence that someone goes, oh, maybe I'll go, if I'm going to attack someone, it's going to be someone weaker?
It depends on the teacher, right? So martial arts is a nice concept, like anything, like Zen or meditation, but even meditation can be extremely harmful and make you more even egoistical. And there is even proof now to that. There's a lot of research now about it that shows that mindfulness can make people actually more egoistic. So that makes a lot of sense. So, especially because it is taken out of the context. When you take mindfulness out of the whole context of spirituality, which it is never meant to be. And the same as with martial arts. It really depends on the teacher. If a teacher can give you a lot of compassion and presence, that is the most essential thing he can teach you. And everything else, all the technique, is actually all about that. Creating presence with your body, creating presence with yourself, and also how to relate from presence with others and boundaries, right? Because I studied Taekwondo, so I learned a lot about boundaries. You have to feel the boundary of someone else, not to hurt them, but at the same time interact. So physically. So this is all about this. It can be depending on the teacher, of course.
Yeah, that's really and cool. We have that connection because I studied Taekwondo when I was younger, but I didn't do it go very far. So I probably didn't have the right.
Me neither.
But from that perspective, and I love that. There's so much there that I love about what you're talking about the mindfulness concept and the meditation. It's really important, and you're one of the few people that I've talked to that actually has gone to that point where, from as I understand it, a belief is just a thought that we've repeated over and over again. Now, if you are meditating, and you mentioned Hitler before, I mean, he obviously repeated a number of thoughts over and over again, which weren't very nice to other people as a result. I mean, given all, the Holocaust and all the things the atrocities that were committed. But he was very firm in his belief to the extent of when the war was ending. I mean, he got the Germans to just destroy everything, and he's, from what I read, his whole belief was that, because they didn't stand up and win this war, they don't deserve to live. Is that what you're talking about? And that's an extreme example, but is that what you're talking about? We can, if we're not careful about how we go about our meditation and mindfulness, we can actually head down a dark path, to quote Star Wars. We can go to the dark side.
Yeah, Star Wars is not simple, it's simplified. It's simplified simplicity. And that's the problem with Star Wars. But then again, who would watch Star Wars where the dark side can be actually good and the good can be bad? So it's either this or that usually. It's more entertaining. But reality is that we have to integrate our darkness. We have to integrate our shadows, we call it in the psychology, in the Jungian psychology. So when we talk about Hitler, what we actually mean is the inner Hitler within ourselves. And Hitler was living out, basically, he's a perfect example of the inner Hitler that we all have within ourselves. That voice that talks to us. If you don't do this or that, you don't deserve anything of this. You don't deserve to live. If you don't get successful, if you don't, and we say that to ourselves, we say that to our children, and so forth. We judge other people, and so that voice, we all have that voice within ourselves in this extreme. And not everyone is aware of it, and that's the problem. And so raising first awareness for that is a lot of work, because we have a lot of different coping mechanisms and resistances built up, walls around ourselves, not to see that. And one of the biggest walls many of us have, especially people who are more let's say, have a democratic world view is the good-hearted person.
Mm-hmm.
So in Germany, we call it the Biedermann.
Yeah.
And the Biedermann is a person who thinks he's a good-hearted person. He's doing good. He's following with everything that government and society is telling him to do. He's never breaking the law. He's never breaking rules. He's always a good person and doing good things. And so it starts from very simple, just being a normal, kind of very ordinary, good-hearted person. And it goes to the extreme of trying to save the world, trying to rescue other people, trying to whatever beautiful agenda, right, you have, right? So, and that in a way is nothing bad about it. It's good to have visions and to want to help other people, absolutely. But the problem is if it becomes your identity, and if that identity is actually built on a fundament, on a fundament of suppressing your shadows, suppressing that inner Hitler within you, suppressing all that voices that you don't want to be, you don't want to hear inside yourself, then this always, on the long term, leads to destruction and to more harm to yourself and to others, and does not lead to a better world at all. And that is what we see right now in this world. If you look around, there is a lot of good, but there is also a lot of good people with a lot of good intentions. Like, for example, Germany, the Germans give a lot of clothing, especially Europeans, the whole Europe gives a lot of clothing to Africa. So they have clothes. But what we don't see is that we actually throw away all our clothes there, which is mostly not used, and at the same time destroying their industry, which produces clothing, because they cannot produce so cheap, good quality clothes then. So we don't see that by giving them the fish instead of teaching them to fish, we actually do the opposite of good. And so we have thousands of examples like this. Which we can see, and we have to look at this. Self-righteousness comes from that, right? A self-righteous ego, a feeling of, oh, I'm better than you because I'm doing this and this and that. And that is a feeling of superiority, right? And so all of that, it creates a more toxic environment on the long run, even though we are doing good things. We think we are doing good things. And that is why we have to connect spiritual practice, ideology, philosophy, and so forth with therapy work. Therapy work is not disconnected from spirituality whatsoever. If we truly want to strive, we have to become the change that we want to see in the world, and not just change the world.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there, that's really this whole I'm helping out, therefore I'm better. That's, I mean, because I'm a bit struggling with what to say to that, but I just look at that and go, well, if you're helping out because you want to be better than the other person, that's a really dark place to be, I would imagine. And I guess I'm drawing from my mum here. When I grew up, she would say, help because you want to, not because you want something in return. And that something in return is, if you're thinking that you're going to be better because you're helping, well, that's something in return. You just help because you want to help. Is that the process that we should be taking?
Yes, in a way, yes. But as you said before, it's the most basic, the essence of it is to be yourself first. Not about what you say to your child, but to project that energetically to your child first. So because the children, especially the children, they learn before they learn through words, they learn through feeling. They feel you. And if you say one thing, but you actually feel something different, if you're not actually there, then at some point that teaching that you implement in your child will collapse and will become the opposite. It will become a polarity. And that is why we see many times children who were taught to do one thing by their parents, and then they do the exact extreme of this as a rebellion.
Is that the case? Because, I mean, I get this a lot where because my son is 14 and he's had the latest iPhone since I can't remember, or whenever I got a new one, he got a new one. But the irony of that is my iPhone lives on silent. And all my devices live on silent because I don't like being interrupted, and it's poor time management. I'm an efficiency sort of focus on that. But what I've noticed, there was a couple of times there we were going out, and my son does. I've noticed he doesn't use the phone a lot, but we were heading out, and I saw his phone was sitting on the desk, on his desk, and I said, "Oh, because we were going out with my friends," and he goes, "Oh," I said, "Are you going to take it because you're going to be bored?" And he goes, "No, I don't need it. It'll be fine." I said, "But yeah, but with my old grumpy friends," and he goes, "No, I'll be fine." And um, and I was just wondering from that perspective, because I didn't tell him not to use his phone, and he's not doesn't sit on social media a lot or anything like that. And I always wondered, was that just simply him role modeling what I'm doing? Because I don't sit on my phone all the time. And I was just wondering how important that role modeling is. If you're going to be a good parent, is it better just to focus on being a good person? And good's probably not the right word, but is it better to focus on improving yourself as opposed to improving the child?
I do believe that. I cannot tell you right now 100% because I just became a father. My child is just Diamond is just 4 months old,
Yeah.
so I cannot say 100%. I did work with
That's about
children,
when they start with
and
iPhones.
mostly. So I worked with children, and I always see that it's better to work with the parents than with the children first.
Mm.
And unfortunately, most parents don't want to work on themselves. They just want to send their children, and that's a mistake from my perspective. But at the same time, it is what it is, and I do not judge that, even though I do.
Yes. No, but it's
So
a very key point that you're raising there, though. But it is, if you're working, it's interesting because I see that a lot with parents, and that same example, and friends, where they'll be complaining about how their child is always on the phone, and while they're complaining about it, they're scrolling through their social media, and it's like, well, aren't you just leading by example from that perspective? So I just wonder about that. What do you think it is where people this self-awareness, because I always wonder, to me, um, I see life as pretty easy, pretty simple. There's some fundamental principles. If you follow those, life is pretty straightforward. And money's a good example. If you spend less than you earn, you invest the difference and you reinvest that, you'll be wealthy. It's not an aberration. It will happen. It's just what's going to happen. Yet, as simple as that instruction is, very few people do it. A lot of people know it consciously, but they don't do it. What is it that's stopping people having that awareness that they're the one causing the problem?
that's a deep question. That's
I've got a big pool out
many things.
back.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's not just one thing.
Mm,
So, because it depends really from what perspective we are looking, from the human perspective, from the spiritual perspective, from the physical perspective, from the psychological perspective. So there is many. One of the major things could be trauma.
mm,
So trauma is a word that many people misunderstand. Many people would think that trauma is something some big experience that happened in my life, and so I couldn't digest that. It was hurtful and didn't happen to me, so I don't have trauma.
yeah.
But that's not the case. The truth is that there are different types of trauma, and some of them are completely hidden to the
Mm,
normal eye.
yeah.
For instance, I had many times a client who came to me with depression, and they said, I feel depressed, and I don't know why, because my family was very happy, and we had everything, and they gave me love. They were there for me, So I don't know why I'm depressed. And then during the session, we realized that in his, as a child, his family were happy and there was a lot of happiness and laughter, but the parents were not able to be negatively emotional at all. And they didn't deal with it in any way. They just suppressed it or were hiding it.
Okay.
And so that kind of thing is actually, yes.
I was going to say, when you're saying, I just wanted to clarify negatively emotion. So if they had a sad feeling or something like that, they suppressed it as opposed to dealing with that. Is that what you mean with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Apologies for interrupting.
Anger.
Yep.
Oh, no problem. You can always interrupt me. So anger, sadness, whatever. So all this negative emotion that every human being has, we all have emotions and they are not always happy. So, and not only we have them because of ourselves or our own life. The thing is that what Zen is actually teaching is a heart-opening experience, but it's not a heart-opening experience like as in modern kind of new age yoga or spirituality where you open your heart and I feel the love and beautiful butterflies flying all over me. Zen opening of the heart is the connection with the whole humanity, with all hearts, and therefore also with a lot of pain, and it's overwhelming in the beginning. So much you cry and laugh at the same time because you feel the love, you feel the compassion, but you also feel their pain and suffering, and it breaks your heart. And this is the awakening of Zen. This is not just flowers and butterflies.
Is that Satori? Yeah. I've heard the term Satori. Is that the awakening? Or have I misunderstood
Say
that?
It again.
Satori? Is that
Satori? Satori or Kensho. Yeah, Satori is like the, let's say, bigger kind of awakening. Kensho is usually the first awakening that we experience, and it is it's a limited, let's say, awakening. So it's an awakening, but you have to work further and further to really establish it in your life and to expand it. And at some point, when there is a certain expansion happening, then we can call it Satori. Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier at the beginning when we were talking about the boundaries, and you said unconditional love. And before that, you talked about infinity. And when we combine that with love as well, because love doesn't have any boundaries, is that a concept that's difficult for us to understand as mortal beings? That we see ourselves, we have a limited life, but when we look at or when we try and comprehend what infinity is that something difficult to actually grasp and understand? Hey, if I love somebody, I can love somebody fully and I can love someone else fully, and that doesn't take away from the love that I gave to the first person. Is that a difficult concept for people to get?
It is a difficult concept if you see it as a concept. It is very simple if you experience it. Because in the moment you experience it as a concept, infinity is something that never ends. As a concept, emptiness, like we say, the universe is infinite and full of emptiness. And never ending. And so if they're ending, then there is another universe and another universe. So infinity and emptiness are concepts that are not existing, actually. And that is why science cannot prove to us any of that. And that is why they will never prove to us neither emptiness nor infinity, nor that zero actually exists. Because zero is just an invention, which is good, we need it, but at the same time, it's an illusion. There is not such a thing. So the same thing is with infinity. Infinity does not exist actually, and that's why it broke my mind, because I thought it does exist until I realized I became infinity. And at that moment, when you become infinity, you are boundless, but at the same time, you are everything. So there is no boundary necessary for you because you are everything. Therefore, infinity can only exist in a confined space. But if there is no confined space, then infinity is just a concept. Same like emptiness. If you are all the emptiness, if you embody all the emptiness, where is emptiness?
Yeah.
Because everywhere you look is you. So
That's
that
really
is
cool. I love that. And for
why
the
it's so important to experience it and not only be conceptual and mental, like in philosophy or,
because I often wonder about that from the perspective, and I've written a little bit about, people, and I used to struggle with trying to find the why. People say, "I'll find the why," and you'll get motivated, and I struggled with that concept because I was just used to going out and doing it. I didn't really need to understand. It was like, okay, I want to do this, and I went and did it. Is it, from that perspective, when we're talking about that, do you need to go through and have this deep conceptual understanding of why, or can you just exist?
both. Those people who can just exist, like in your case, well, you're lucky because that makes your life very simple and it takes away a lot of the hustle that some people have. And but then, if you want a deeper dimension, if you want, if you need that, that's another question. Because you see, if you not everyone is a painter, and not everyone needs to be a painter. So if you go to an exhibition of a painter, you look at the paintings, and it's pretty simple. You just look at it, you become the painting, you enjoy it, you see something in it. You may interpret it, you may enjoy it, you may laugh or cry, whatever, right? It's pretty simple to enjoy a painting. But to a painter, it's not that simple. So he needs to know, or she needs to know the colors, he needs to gather them, buy them, have a room for painting. There's so much before a painting can come to that canvas, right?
Yeah.
So it's way more complex. You need to, and even if it's easy for the painter, before it became so easy, there was a lot of work involved. So before it could become so effortless, there was a lot of effort also involved. Same like raising a child. To the outside, it seems it's so easy to raise a child. It's so much joyful. Look at the children; it's so easy, right? They play, and so, but to a parent, sleepless nights, right? If you breastfeed, a lot of problems with nutrition. You need to take care of your nutrition. You need to study your body. You need to study yourself. To be a mother, be a father. It's a lot of work, effort involved. It's not just effortless. You sit back and the child is growing by itself, right?
So maybe I was just lazy because I never worried about it, and it just worked. And I have a son who cleans the bathroom. But I did say to him too. We were talking about. I noticed with schooling, when he was very young, there wasn't. Just something triggered in me. So I asked him the question and I said, do you know why you go to school? And he goes, no. And I said, no, I explained, well, part of that is to get an education so you can go out and work and you see what dad does. So, buy food and all that kind of stuff, all those toys that you have that I buy you heaps of, that comes because I've got an education. I can add value to the world and therefore I get reimbursed for that. And from when I explained that to him, all of a sudden his approach to school changed because he understood what he was doing there. And then later it became, okay, what are you going to get? What grades do you want? It's not for me to tell you what to do. You now know the basis that you got to go out and as you mentioned before, teaching to fish as opposed to fishing for him. I'm not going to be there to look. I have no intentions of being there to look. I'm going to kick him out one day. It's like you're not going to live with me forever. And it became that process. And that's why I wonder from that perspective, people talk about being in the zone, because I have that experience a lot where I'll have something to do and it won't be clear. So I'll just let it go. And then all of a sudden it'll come clear and it'll just smash it out really quickly. So I'm not there trying to force myself to do it because I find that doesn't work very well. I just let it go. And and in letting it go, all of a sudden ideas come and it just flows through. Is that part of what's being in the zone? Can we become more productive by, instead of trying to force something to happen, just allow it to be and allow the universe to speak to us?
That's what you're doing, and it works for you, it seems. So yes, for you, definitely. But there are different types of being in the zone, and depending also on the person. And as I said, depending on what your mission is in this life, not everyone needs to be a teacher or to be a master or anything. So it's easier in a way, as Einstein said, if you could choose, you would rather have just a very simple life. And it's much easier to be happy if you have a very simple life. But unfortunately, not everyone's mission is that way. And it's okay, because with the challenges, you also usually have the gifts. And the gifts are usually lying in the fears that we have. If you have no fears, then you have a very comfortable life. But it's good to have some fears and face them, work with them, and learn how to deal with fear. And one of the essential first steps also in therapy, beside boundaries or after boundaries, let's say, is for me to teach people about fear. Just as one example, 15 years ago, I met a therapist, and she was a therapist and an NLP professional, and neuro-linguistic programming, I believe.
Yep. Neuro-linguistic programming.
And I met her in a kind of party cooking setting. Yeah. And we had a conversation. She asked me what I'm doing. I told her about my work, and I told her about fear, and I told her that I'm sure she has fear too. And she told me straight on, no, I don't have any fear whatsoever, and all my friends can tell you that I am a very brave, fearless person. So I told her, you know what? If you want, I give you a session. I give you a free session. Here is my card. Here's my number, and call me, and then we will find out. And she didn't call me for a long time. It was taking about two months. She called me then after 2 months, and then again she canceled the session. I don't know why. And then
nothing to do
finally,
with fear. Nothing to do with fear.
Exactly. 3 months later or so, we actually met. And it was very simple. I just looked into her eyes. We just looked into each other's eyes. And suddenly she said, yeah, I feel this and I feel that in my solar plexus. And before I said, what do you feel? Where do you perceive the world? She said, in my head. So obviously, how can you feel fear if you're only in your head? If you're cut off from your body, if you're very mental, very cerebral, you don't feel fear, but it doesn't mean that fear is not existent in you. And so we are basically, a lot of us are like walking icebergs. And not all icebergs are Jewish, by the way. So even though the name is suggesting. So this is just like we see ourselves as that peak experience of ourselves, peak experience, high on life. But we don't see what is under the veil. And there's a lot. And well, why would I need to look there? Why do you need to look at it if you are feeling okay? Well, you don't. Honestly, you don't need. If you feel okay with that, great. In Buddhism, we call it the heavenly beings, the real of the heavenly beings. And it's actually one of the worst, it's actually the worst type of hell you can be in. Because it's like a prison cell in which you have everything. Everything you need, you have it. Why would you want to escape from it? If you have an ugly prison cell, a lot of suffering involved, you want to get out. You want to explore what is beyond it. But if you feel comfortable in it, why would you want to explore it? And so therefore, in Zen, we call it the 3 pillars. And the 3 pillars of Zen are great doubt, great faith, and great power, great strength. So you need to have that great strength, you need to have that great faith, but you also need to have great doubt. And that doubt is fear-based, because there is a lot of fear involved with doubt, usually, if it's real. Because doubt, if it's true, deep, great doubt, it goes into all your life. It questions everything. It questions, who am I? what am I doing? Is that actually good what I'm doing? Do I actually know what I'm doing? And if you don't have that great doubt, well, then you may have great faith still and great power, and you may still create a lot of good things, and that's okay.
I wonder what
But
the striving.
something will be missing then. And in Zen, if you want to go the Zen way, you will need great doubt. And if you don't have it, your teacher will definitely give it to you.
But I wonder about that, and I've had a couple of Star Trek references pop into my head as you've been talking. But this concept that you're talking about, in that, if you're in that box where you have total bliss, so to speak, without the great doubt, and I love that concept of the great doubt, because there's a being called Q, and they're all omnipotent, know everything. In the Star Trek reference, if you know the Star Trek world, you know where I'm coming from. Okay.
Of course.
Yeah, and
you look like Q.
I'm a little bit cheeky, so maybe I can get away with that. But there was an episode where one of the beings wanted to commit suicide because when they explained it, it's like they knew everything. There was nothing more to experience. And if you don't have that doubt, when you talk about that person who said they don't have fear, I mean, and that's just a shutting off. If you're shutting it off, but it's still there, it's kind of like saying you don't have a heart. It's still, you can believe you don't have a heart, but it still exists. And so from that concept, is that, I mean, I'm looking at it going, why would you want to chase that when that doubt is what actually, gives you part of that exhilaration when you overcome that? Overcoming that fear gives you an exhilaration as well, gets you to experience all those feelings. What is it? Is it a fear that, I mean, is that what it is? Repression of a fear to stop people wanting to experience fear? Or is it a not knowing?
Ignorance. And ignorance is based on not knowing, not understanding, but also fear and resistance. But that is not something we do consciously. So it is unconscious. It is an imprint of trauma. Now we come back to trauma because we just started and I didn't really finish there. Okay. So trauma is not such a big deal, actually. Like many therapists talk about trauma, many people talk about trauma. It's not a big deal. In my work, trauma is not the main thing because many people, especially in your age, in my age, when you become older, trauma is not the big problem usually. It is the imprint of trauma which is the problem. And the imprint is, you can imagine like a stone. You take a stone, that is the traumatic event. And then you take yourself, your awareness, your beingness, and that is the wood. And so then you put that stone on that wood. And now leave that stone on that wood, leave that trauma for a longer period of time. What will happen is that even if the stone disappears, and it usually disappears with time, trauma can heal by itself with time, the imprint will remain most likely. And so then you have some imprint in that wood, right? So even though the stone is gone, and that imprint will affect your life, it will project into life situations, it will attract certain life situations and certain people without you understanding why. Because you think you don't have any trauma, everything is okay. But what we need to realize is there are different types of trauma, and there's also transgenerational trauma, which is basically, and the national trauma, which we also have. So transgenerational trauma is a trauma which we all have from our ancestors, from our parents, from their parents, and everyone has something of it. And it's not the trauma anymore, it's a misconcept. It's actually the imprint, most likely. It's not anymore that you are traumatized from past lives or other people's life, but it's the imprint. And the same is the national trauma, that if you are American, for instance, you're born in America, most likely, if you are like your parents are experienced, for example, the Great Depression, right? Then that fear of not having enough, that fear of not having enough food, not having enough material means will guide you, will drive you to become very successful maybe. But at the same time, it will always be some kind of fear to lose it. And so then you will not be able to actually enjoy it. And you will always feel, as so many millionaires or even richer, that they actually don't have so much because it can be lost anytime. Because their success is often driven by the fear, which they don't see. So even great artists, most of the great artists, they get their creativity from pain, from suffering, from depression, or from that imprints. So trauma is in all of us. It's just that it's not trauma anymore most of the time. It's just like in PTSD, something that is very obvious. That is a very small group of people. But all of us have the imprints of trauma, and they show themselves through shadows, through things that we usually don't want to see in ourselves, don't even see in ourselves, but often project to others or to groups of people or to other nations or whatever, or to the president is like this and like he's, or the rich or the 1% or whatever. And there's nothing wrong in doing that. It's absolutely true. But at the same time, it is wrong if we don't see that within ourselves and just fight it from the outside. So if you try to change the world from the outside by making it a better place, nothing will change. We just make it worse, actually.
Is that a case from the perspective of this trauma that we're having and that we carry it forward? Is it a case, the reason that we do that is that we don't separate our behaviors from who we are as a person? And I'll highlight an example, and for the listeners, you may have heard this before. A long time ago, I was helping at a friend's wedding. And so I was at the front of the church helping out. And there was a spot for the bridal car to pull up out the front, wasn't marked. Someone's pulled up and parked there. And so I've stormed over, I'm looking after the bride. What the hell are you parking there? And I've jumped down this guy's throat as he gets out of the car and, got really angry and shoot him out. And he, with his girlfriend or wife, whoever, he's obviously very upset. Now, today I know different behaviors of dealing with that situation. So I would deal with it differently. Now, I look at that and go, well, was my behavior poor? Yeah, very much so. It wasn't great. As a person, was I a good person? I think I was a good person. I think I am a good person. But my behaviors are different. So I look at it and go, if I do something that's not great, I'll go, oh, I could improve that behavior. I consider myself to be a ball of light, like you said, unconditional love. And it's just my behaviors. And as a result of that, I feel I can let go of things quite easily. It's like, well, I recognize that's not a good behavior. Let's do it differently. Is that a separation that people need to make, or is it just something different that I'm doing, or is there other way to let go of trauma in a simple way?
Well, I'm not seeing as much the connection now to trauma, or I wouldn't draw the line now to trauma directly. But this could be an imprint of trauma. So a feeling of insecurity or a feeling of not feeling safe. And then whenever you discover a situation where you don't feel safe, that you become angry or you become defensive, or even to the point that you start to attack. So that can come in your case, because I connected now also to that, what you told me before with the car and the SUV and the big guy coming from that SUV. So
okay.
maybe there is a connection in that somewhere in your history or in your past experience, you felt or they felt insecure, or they were actually even in danger. And so that danger, that energy of danger is still maybe, or was still in you at that time. And you acted the best way possible. And so the first thing to do is to be just compassionate with that and not judging that. And then, because that's human, we all sometimes snap. The question is only, do you need, if you are compassionate with it, with that snap in you, then you will definitely not snap in a way that it will be really bad. Yeah. But if you cannot be compassionate with yourself, and if you try to be a Hitler to yourself by becoming the best person in the world, But that is actually coming from, Hitler was a vegan, right? So he was very good to animals.
Yeah.
He was loving animals. So, or vegetarian. He wasn't a vegan. I think.
I'm glad.
Anyway.
I'm glad I'm not a vegetarian anymore. I might be.
You're a flexitarian.
Exactly. I haven't heard that. I love it.
Yeah, it's possible that it comes from that imprint. And again, it's being compassionate and not having this idea of what it is to be a good person. Goodness is not about being a good person, but about discovering the goodness that is essential to consciousness itself. As I say, the basic goodness, as we say in Buddhism, is actually not something you learn by moral. It's something that you have when you deeply go within yourself, when you become very calm and just really become yourself, connected with yourself. You feel that basic goodness surrounding you inside out. And this is the experience. And then you don't need to be a good person anymore. You just be what you just be. You just be.
But and is that, because that's the part I wanted to get to, was what you were talking about there, was you mentioned about compassion. So recognizing that, you've done something, but being compassionate with yourself, going, hey, yeah, I blew up. That happened. Move on, learn from it, move on. But be compassionate to yourself, not beat yourself up. That's the distinction in allowing. To me, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is that it allows trauma to move away. You're not carrying it around anymore if you're compassionate to yourself. Is that
transform? It doesn't move away, but it transforms into something. So trauma is not something you can move away. In a way, you cannot say there is any healing. Healing is just about learning how to work with it. So healing just means that hurt, which every time you go into that hurt, every time you connect with that hurt or trauma, it's like a wave overcoming you and you're just immersed in it and you cannot breathe anymore. You're like tense and fearful. That is what happens. And then when you heal, the wave doesn't go away. The wave is still there. It's just you learn to surf the wave.
I love that analogy. You surf the wave. Because I was wondering about that from the perspective of when we link our self-esteem into that. Because the way I look at it is a lot of times people misconstrue confidence, experience, and self-esteem. Because if people look at, say, Michael Jordan and go, okay, he's a really confident basketball player. Well, he has a lot of experience, which that gives him not gives him confidence, but he has a lot of experience to know that he's going to do well. Now, confidence, I look at, is your ability to get back up again. And we've all done this as children. And, people that, I don't know who studies this, but people do. Apparently, when you're learning to walk as a child, and you'll experience this with your son, is that he'll get up and fall over. And on average, a person fails to learn to walk about 8,000 times before they actually learn to walk proper. So we've all gone through that experience where we've got up, fallen over, and done it again. And I put that as self-confidence, to go, I know where I'm going to go. I'm just going to keep trying until I get there. Whereas self-esteem is you like yourself regardless. You might mess up, but you still like who you are. You're compassionate to yourself. You still love yourself. Is that, from a Zen perspective, how would Zen approach that between the experience, confidence, and self-esteem?
This is about the psychological term, which is self-efficacy. Have you ever heard about that?
I've heard the name. I don't know the detail.
So self-efficacy is basically exactly what everything you describe in a way, in a nutshell. And it's the faith in yourself based on the experience that no matter what adversity, challenge may come towards you,
Mm.
you feel you can handle it, you can do it, you can overcome it. And so it's not just to be confident, but it's a confidence based on experience.
Mm.
And there are different ways to go about it. So psychologically, we would go about it by having experience, collecting different types of experiences in our lives,
Yeah.
but also by using positive affirmation. So I can do it, I believe in myself, and so forth.
Mm.
So that would be like a positive psychology approach.
Yeah.
And in Zen, the essence of self-efficacy and it is not so much your mind, not even your experience, but your beingness itself again. So instead of being good, being a good person, find that goodness within yourself. And so here again, instead of being confident, have self-assurance, and self-assurance comes from connecting with your beingness itself. When you connect with your beingness itself, your beingness starts to speak through you and live through you. That is the most powerful self-confidence, self-assurance you can have. And that's the base, that should be the base of self-efficacy. And so, because if it is not the base, you will always feel not good enough, not far enough. You will always feel there is a lack. But when you are becoming infinity, as I said, there is no infinity anymore. So there is no lack. And at the same time, there will always be some doubt. There will always be a feeling of lack. But that lack, that doubt will not anymore get you out of the way and block you, but it will unblock you. It will open you and allow you even further to become that what you already are, rather than becoming what you want to be or where you think you need to be or whatever. So great doubt in this manner means that instead of doubting yourself, I'm not good enough, I cannot do that, or I'm an imposter, you realize that all of that wants to lead you actually away from the small self into the bigger self. And the bigger self is not just something, concept, spiritual ego, kind of bigger self, but it's what we all are. It's the essence of our beingness. It's the essence of awareness. And so that, when we become that, when we speak from it, when we write from it, when we act from it, when we create from it, in that manner, in that moment, we don't have any imposter or doubt or anything. And yet we have it. It's in the field, but it doesn't block us. It just helps us to expand even further. And so that is why we need great doubt, in order to expand. But if you regress, if you become smaller, if you fall into transcendence, if you fall into some form of trance, right? Sure, you feel good, you feel happy, but you don't expand, you don't include, you exclude. And by excluding, you feel better, but it's like taking a drug, right? You take ecstasy or you take whatever drug you take, and that makes you happy, but that happiness is very confined. It makes you very small-minded, very egoistical for your own happiness, right?
Yeah. So from that, because I mean, what you're talking about there is, because for the people that are feeling unconfident or lacking confidence, because I was very fortunate. I had a mentor. He was a fairly well experienced businessman. He was the managing director and chairman of BP. And he had, you mentioned about fishing and not, teaching to fish and not fish. Whenever I'd text him for advice, I'd never get a response straight away. It'd be like 2 or 3 days later, because I think, he was teaching me to fish. He's like, you work it out first, have a think about it. But I had one time where I was going to a meeting and it was coming up fairly quickly and I was unsure. And I wrote to him and said, can you give me some advice? This is happening. And funnily enough, he wrote back straight away, which is unusual. And these are probably the most powerful, for me, powerful advice that I ever got. And he just wrote back and he wrote, Damien, I think you should back yourself that you'll make the right decision in the moment. And that's where, when you talk about that self-doubt, because there's a lot of times now where, where I will, finish a meeting and I've got some tasks to do from that, I'll be thinking, holy crap, how am I going to do this? And then I'll let it go and go, I'll work it out. I'll sort it out. And I always do. I always get it done, and I always get something done. When I go back, I go, wow, look, well, you've done, this amazing thing. And I wonder, from that perspective, I didn't have that growing up, but there was a study done some time ago, and they took people that were really exceptional across a broad range of things. Your Steven Spielbergs, all these people that were very, very good at what they did. And what they wanted to do was find a common factor that they all had. And it was across a huge number of people, so it was really different. And they went through all these factors, and I think they got up to 280 or so different factors, and none of them correlated. And then they found one. And what they found was that it was usually the parent of the opposite sex. So if it was a male, it was the mother, and vice versa. Not always, but usually. But what it was that parent had, when the child was young, between between birth and 5, they had an unwavering belief in the child's ability. So if the child said, I'm going to be an astronaut, that they would say, you're going to be the best astronaut ever. You're going to be fantastic. And what they determined from that was, it wasn't so much whether the child was going to be an astronaut. It was setting up for the child that they had a strong belief in themselves, that in their own ability, that they liked themselves, that they had this strong ability, that they could do whatever it is that they set their mind to. How does that relate to the Zen principles that you teach about, from a perspective, if you haven't got that as a young child? I think I learnt it later in life, but how does that relate to Zen principles, and is that something that people can have, or are they just stuck with what they got?
So, look, there is a dragon. Kill it right now.
I'm already I can do that. It's going to be tough. I might need a good shield and a good sword.
So this is the way of Zen practice. We work with koans, and one of the koans is, see, there is a dragon. Kill it right now.
Yeah.
Like this. And many people who come to Zen, and when they are presented with that koan, they do like, where is the dragon? I cannot see. Or, I don't want to kill the dragon. Or they're shocked. So what is that koan about? That koan is about imagination, opening your imagination and freeing yourself.
Yeah.
In that field, allowing yourself within the field of imagination to do whatever you like, to be free, at least in your imagination. Yeah. Without moral, without ideas, because why do you need in your imagination to have all of that? Why can you not, in your imagination, just imagine and just like a child and see the world from that perspective of imagination? Yeah. And that's why Einstein said that the greatest intelligence that humans possess is not knowledge, is imagination. And so this is undervalued. And so when you speak about that statistic, I think what they cannot check in that statistic, because therapists have no real possibility to see if that is there or not, is actually what connects them is that they were opened for imagination. They were opened and they were childlike minded. They were opened in their mind, in their heart, and there was a connection. And so because of that openness and allowing imagination to be part of reality, they can see reality in not just in the now, but including presence and future. And that's what, when people like Eckhart Tolle say, the power of now, people understand, well, just be here right now in this moment. Let's exclude the past. Let's exclude the future. Doesn't matter what happened yesterday. Doesn't matter what happened to me in my past. I'm just in the now. And what they don't see is that with that, they exclude the now. They cut off the now, because the now is timeless and it has a relative time. In the psychological in the subconsciousness, time does not have space. And so what it means is that if something happened to you in your childhood and you come back to it, it feels like as if it's happening at this moment. And so time is relative, as Einstein said. And if we truly want to be in the now, we have to include the future and the present. And for that, we need imagination. And so if we cut imagination, it's like we are cutting the antenna that we have that helps us to connect to the world and receive all the informations and not just framing a framed part of informations. And so how can we teach that? Well, if you don't have it, you need to be lucky to find a teacher later on, or society needs to go in that direction. But right now, school is still very old school, right? So they don't teach you too much imagination. And if you look at media, social media and all this, if a child is grown already on computers, on telephone and so forth, which I'm not against, but we need to also teach the child to read books, because reading books is one of the best ways to teach imagination. And if we don't have that power, that sense developed, because we see all the time just the things, our mind doesn't have to work so much, then our imagination cannot be as powerful, then our creativity cannot be as powerful. But of course, it's generalized, because there may be children who never read a book in their life and still have a broad variety of imagination. Those genius children are exceptions, though, I think. So,
but is that I mean, what you're talking about, that childlike mentality of being able to play, being able to fail? I mean, because that's part of that imagination process, isn't it? You come up with something
and play.
Play, yeah.
Play. But in play, you never fail. This is the concept. This is the thing why I don't even talk about failing. Because when you play, you never think about failing. You just play. If something doesn't work, you just do something else or do different. You take Lego, you do something. You don't have also. You're not creating something for a means to an end. Therefore, where's the fail there? Fail is only there if you have already that concept of arriving somewhere. If you don't have it, if you're really just playing, there is no failure. A child does never say, oh, I just failed with my car to get into this or that. It just happens, whatever. Failure really comes from that. If you have already that fundament that there is a means to an end, there is something you need to reach to be. And so then in that case, yes, as an adult, if you already have that structure built, as most of us have, we need to learn to fail. And we need not just to learn to fail, to embrace failure and to just celebrate it all the way through. Because only through failure we can actually gain new knowledge, new wisdom, and things that we don't know yet.
Yeah. From that perspective, when you're talking about, celebrating, and we're coming back to being happy and being aware of what's around us. I had an experience when I was younger, when I was in Perth, and my girlfriend lived north, and the road went up the coast. It was a beautiful drive, but there was lots of traffic lights. And obviously I'm going to see my girlfriend, so I'm really excited to get there. And any red traffic light is really frustrating. So I used to think I was getting all the red lights because I get really frustrated. And because I'm anally retentive, I decided one day that I was going to count all the lights. And I had a notebook next to me, and I wrote, ticked where green or red. And it turned out that I was getting so many more green lights, and I wasn't noticing them because the red ones were frustrating me. Is that something from the perspective that we have that affects our ability to be happy? Is that we're noticing, because things that we're attaching so much emotion to things that we don't want, that we actually forget or we're not grateful for the things that we actually do have. And if we switch that around and actually became more aware of what's the whole reality is, then this unhappiness that a lot of people are experiencing would dissipate.
In a way, yes, but it's not the case, right? Most people don't have that unhappiness. So we have to work with what we have. And what we have is the notion to get away from the present moment into expectations, into positive expectations or negative expectations. Positive expectations is I want to have more of this, and I want this to happen when I do this. Negative expectations, I don't want that to happen. So this and this shouldn't happen. So all that expectations are hindering us to be in the present moment. But then again, should we have no expectation and just be in the present moment without any expectation? No. So we need expectation. Humans need to have expectations. If we make up an appointment, you expect me to be on time, more or less. And you expect me to be present, so with you. And you expect me to be there with you and not just, I don't know, talking to someone else or writing papers, right? That is your expectation. And I think this is a good expectation. But if you would now hold on to that expectation tightly, if you attach yourself to it, most likely you will encounter many times people breaking that rule for you because you are attached to it, so you attract the polarity. And so what we have to learn is to have expectation without holding on to them, to let them be rather than to hold them. And let them be means to have an opened hand and hold them in an opened hand rather than in a fist. And that's it.
Is that from that perspective? Because I've done a little bit of writing on this. Like you, I'm writing a book as well, and writing several, but I've got to choose one and focus on that. But one thing that I made a shift some time ago, because I don't like referring to things as good or bad and light and dark and stuff. I think that's great for storytelling. We mentioned Star Wars before. But I now draw from Shakespeare in Scene 2, Act 2 from Hamlet, where they say nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. And I have that, or you meant to mention about that expectation. So it's not that I don't expect things to happen. I had an interview earlier today. The person didn't turn up, and I'm aware that could happen. And I have other things to do. And while I'm waiting, I'll be doing other things until the person turns up. If they don't turn up, I just keep doing what I'm doing, and then I'll send them an email saying, guessing something come up and what happened. This person, the email that I'd sent went to their junk mail, and they missed it, and we rescheduled. So I didn't get upset about that. But in the same token, I was able to use it. Similar sort of thing, where I've had some experiences, friends have said to me with some of the experiences I've had, they go, how are you still standing? How are you still, alive? Given most people wouldn't survive what you've been through, without getting into details, some pretty traumatic stuff that I've gone through. But for me, I've never saw that as a bad experience. I was able to learn from it, but it wasn't, I had to find the good in it. I just saw it as an experience, and because I was focused on a direction on where I wanted to go, it's like, okay, that experience happened. I can use that this way. Is that part of Zen philosophy as well, or is that a different type of thinking?
It's more of a thinking, because Zen is not really a philosophy. Zen is based really on beingness and what is essential to beyond the thinking mind.
Right.
And then once you are in that, you connect the thinking mind. You don't escape it, but you learn to allow it to be part of it. So it's inclusive.
Right. So from a happiness perspective, I mean, is it a case where we can just shift how we're interpreting things? And because I don't have bad days anymore. I mean, it's not I don't have fear. I have fear. I have, things don't go well and go, okay, I feel that, and I'll deal with that. And at the end of the day, I go to bed and I go, I've had a good day. I've had a really good day. I've dealt with all these things. I've had but I don't expect it to be. I love those little charts, and you've got, this is the plan, and you've got this straight line that it's going to be nice and smooth, and then you go, this is what happens, and it's all over the shop, and you've got these bumps and trees and hollows and stuff like that. That's to me is life. So if we're have this expectation it's going to be smooth and no problems, then of course you're going to be upset. But if you're expecting that life is going to be life, you can just enjoy it for what it is. Is that one way of approaching happiness?
It is your way of approaching happiness. So,
yeah. So it is one way. That's cool.
For me, as a therapist and as a Zen master, I have to I meet different people, and so the mastery in it is to really attune to each individual and find and feel with them together what is the best path for them. Because each person, if I learned one thing, is each person is different.
Yeah.
And as in Zen say, you cannot even share one fart with each other because they are all different. So
I'm going to use that analogy.
Therefore,
I love it.
therefore, we need to open ourselves completely, and in order to understand the other person, and we need to let go of our own philosophy, our own self. Then again, if you are not a Zen master, if you not intend to become a Zen master or a therapist, it doesn't make it's not necessary for you to go that way. It's not your mission, then maybe. Maybe it is now that we met. Who knows, right? But you see, if you in a certain state, when you reach a certain state, every day becomes a good day. There is a koan in Zen for that. Every day is a good day. So you may experience some part of this koan in your life, and you achieved a certain level where you perceive every day right now as a good day. But you never know. I have clients who lost their wife for cancer. I have clients who lost a child. I have clients who were betrayed. So would you say then the same thing? If someone dies who you love of cancer, would you say, oh, but every day is a good day? So you're lucky right now, but that doesn't mean that maybe one day something will happen. And I can assure that at some point something will happen, not necessarily in your life with anyone else, but when you die, we all die at some point, you will have to face also a weak body, a weak mind, and all of that. And so then you will face pain, you will face suffering. And so if you don't have it now, as in Zen, one example for this is, and after this, I would like to round it up for today, is when I at the monastery in Japan, there are many monks who come from priest families. And so they are born already into this whole concept of Buddhism, meditation, and they are quite happy. They are often have no trauma whatsoever, at least nothing visible. They know how to work hard. They know how to dedicate themselves with passion in what they do. And they are very calm, very peaceful, and so forth. So because they already, as children, they already grew up in a temple, right? And so many who come to a monastery, they actually have parents and a father who is a priest. And that's why in Japan they become monks then. Usually the oldest son becomes a monk in a monastery. And so what happens is when they meditate, they just sit in full lotus and sleep. Full lotus, they don't have much pain. So because they are used to it as a child already. And so they just sit and they sleep. Many of them, they just sleep in meditation. And when I was the first time in the monastery in Japan, I thought that they are doing some secret practice that I am not understanding yet. Because they are like sitting and like this all the time.
Like my son in the car on the way to school.
I thought maybe some kind of Jewish prayer or something. I don't know. Someone didn't introduce to me some secret technique. I really didn't understand because I couldn't sleep in sitting. I had so much pain, and my mind there was so much going on in my mind. I was obsessed with thinking, and it was painful for me. So when you are in society and everything works out for you, you're not aware of it. But if I put you in a retreat, let's say 4 days, usually a retreat in Zen monastery is about 7 to 8 days, where you sit for 21, 22 hours, and then the rest you may lay down sometimes in some of the retreats, and some retreats you cannot lay down at all, so you have to sleep even in sitting. You will have, after about 1 day, 2 days, you will have tremendous pain. All your body will be painful, and you will think this is hell, because physically it's just so much pain. Then comes the cold or the mosquitoes in the summertime, the heat, because there is no ventilation, there is no heating. So then I want to see how you're doing. And then you think, man, this is hell. There's so much pain, so much suffering, right? You will think this is hell. But then I will give you another 2 days, maybe one more day or 2 days. And you will kind of get used a little bit to the pain, kind of a little bit surrender a little bit, maybe usually after the 4th day, also to the hunger. And then you'll think, if I would just have not the pain and the hunger, I would be perfectly sitting there and meditate and become enlightened. And so after about 3 to 4 days, maybe you get that state where you kind of have less pain. And then suddenly your mind is rumbling and non-stop rumbling, and emotions and mental and boredom, utter boredom. And it's like sitting there and like, what the hell? You think you are getting crazy. You're losing your mind. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, nothing happens. You just sit and sit and sit and sit. And nothing happens. You're wasting your youth. You're wasting your time. You cannot speak. You cannot talk to the people. You cannot share anything. What happened? You get angry, you get frustrated, and you sit with all that emotions, with all that anger, and you cannot move. You cannot do anything about it. And your head is exploding because suddenly all that energy that you developed through the pain, it's actually energy, developing energy. It goes up into your head, and your head is starting to 10, 100 times more think than ever before. And then you realize, my God, how much thoughts are going on in my head. I was never even aware of that.
Yeah.
And then you will have a red head and you will burn and you will think, my God, compared to this, the physical pain is nothing. Because it's like you are losing your mind, you have psychosis in the moment and you cannot move. You want to run, but you cannot. So that, my friend, is where you realize that life is suffering, as the Buddha said. And the Buddha said that as a first rule, because many people actually are not aware of it, even though it is so simple. So we have to come to that conclusion. And therefore, if your life is so good, if I would be your teacher, the first thing I would tell you is make it a little bit more challenging. Maybe sit down in the full lotus. If you meditate, sit in the full lotus, have some pain, and see if you are still calm, and if you're still happy. And if you're not, then you know what to do. You know you have a challenge, and you can work with that. Don't stay where you are. Don't cling to the state, the happiness that you achieve. Yeah. That is the way of Zen. It doesn't mean you cannot be happy. It doesn't mean that you cannot enjoy what you have. But it also means, for the sake of all beings, I don't want to just personal happiness. I want to have also wisdom, not just happiness. And I want to expand in that. So this is the way of Zen. It's not for everyone.
I love it. That's awesome. I love that description you were talking about, sitting in that lotus position, because I know that experience, and it can get very painful very quickly if you're not used to it. Certainly if you're not flexible too, very much so.
It's still painful for me. I still have pain. Yeah. Not as much, but I just learned to use that wave. And that's the difference. But the pain doesn't go away.
That's a good point. So you wanted to sum that, or was that the sum up, or was that you said you wanted to sum up after this?
That was the sum up. Yes, I think we have a round podcast session today.
Life is suffering. We've got to that.
I'm thirsty, and my child needs milk.
Fair enough too. Jion, thank you very much for taking the time here on the podcast, sharing so much wisdom. It's wonderful. We'll put your contact detail, we'll have all your contact details in there so people can reach out to you, because I know you need to go. But great. Yeah, I loved researching for this, looking at all the wonderful work you're doing and the different approach that you take with the Zen. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much, Dana. I enjoyed tremendously, and I would love to have us again together. So
I'd love to have further chats. That'd be wonderful.
Perfect. I'm looking forward then. So let's keep in touch, and thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.